Good evening, I'm Kramer here with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website at weather.gov/Alaska. You can get any updates to our forecast through that means, or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we have out for your area. You can also call our weather info line at 1-800-472-0391 and get any updates through that means as well. And if you have any questions or comments for us, you can email us at the address at the bottom, nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. We do have from yesterday, one of our employees at the office here was able to take video of the hail that was happening during a thunderstorm over South Anchorage yesterday afternoon. You can see we have pea-sized hail there landing on the sidewalks and eventually on the road next to the car there. And if you have any information like this picture or video, you can let us know through Facebook, through Twitter, or that email address on the previous slide. Moving forward, we'll look at our fire danger, mostly over the northwestern part of the interior, up on the northern part of Kotzebue Sound, all the southwestern part of the Brooks Range. And as we look at our satellite imagery, we can start way off to the west. We have some cloud cover out over the western and central Aleutians. And even though we don't see a lot on this satellite image, it's not picking up a lot of the low-level clouds that we have over much of the central and western part of the Bering Sea. However, eastern parts of the Bering Sea are seeing a lot of clear skies. That does include the Pribilof Islands and areas into the northern parts of Bristol Bay. As we look further off to the east, we have one low pressure system out in the eastern part of the Gulf bringing cloud cover and rain, especially to areas of the southern panhandle. And then moving up over the mainland part of the state, we do have cloud cover over the central and eastern parts of the interior, down through some of south central as well, and that is expected to increase as we have some afternoon showers starting to pick up here throughout the evening. As we look for the remainder of today's weather, we'll start with this low in the eastern part of the Gulf, bringing in some rain to the southern portions of the panhandle. There is some cloud cover in the northern locations, but shouldn't be any rain for the rest of this afternoon, evening hours. We do have some areas of showers picking up, especially in the mountainous terrain along the south central areas. Some of those showers, however, will make it into some of the more low-lying areas. Out over the very eastern parts of the interior, we are expecting to see some isolated areas of thunderstorms with showers further off to the west, and then areas of smoke in the central and southwestern parts of the interior getting down towards the McGrath area. As we move up into the Brooks Range, we are seeing some areas of rain and then a mix of rain and snow as we get along the coast, with it becoming all snow further to the north. Also in the western portions of the Arctic coastline, we do have some areas of fog out there by the Point Hope area. And then down along the coastline, we should see some pretty nice weather conditions until we get down to the northern areas around the Alaska Peninsula, where we are seeing some more low-level clouds in the area. As we move out west, not a lot of precipitation, but there is a lot of cloud cover out over much of the central western Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. As we move into tonight, that's going to be pretty true overnight as well, with high pressure continuing out over the far areas of the western Bering. Not a lot of precipitation over the Aleutian Islands, but could be some lower clouds out there at times. We do have some areas of fog developing in the southern parts of the Bristol Bay area, out over the eastern part of the Bering Sea, and some areas up by St. Lawrence Island as well. And then as we get further to the north along the Arctic coastline, especially central areas of the Arctic coast out through western areas, we are going to see some fog up there. But as we get into the colder overnight hours, we are going to see some snow for the eastern areas of the Arctic coast, including areas of the Brooks Range. And then it will become more rain as we get to some of the more low-lying areas and the warmer conditions there. Out through the interior, not a lot of precipitation, but there is going to be a lot of smoke out there from some of the smaller fires that are having their smoke trapped in the interior areas. Down through south central, not a lot of activity until we get to the far eastern areas, where we are going to see a mix of rain and snow. Again, mostly snow in the mountains and a little bit more rain as we get down into the valley areas. For the Alaska Panhandle, we are going to see some rain still lingering in the southern portions of the area, but just some isolated showers as we move further into the northern locations and out towards Yakutat. For Wednesday, we are going to see continued rain around the Panhandle area. The heaviest stuff should be off further to the south and off to the north and west, up by the Haines-Skagway area and out over areas of Canada, and then pushing into the far eastern parts of south central Alaska. Also along the mountains, especially the Alaska Range and Talkeetna Mountains, we are expecting showers, especially in the afternoon. As we move into the interior, not a lot of precipitation once again, but we are going to see the areas of smoke from the eastern parts of the interior through the central and out by the Galena area. As we move up further to the north, we are going to see some rain in the mountains. However, in the morning hours, we're going to see a lot more snow as we get up into the North Slope area and into the Brooks Range as well, but that is going to transition over primarily to rain as we get into the afternoon, more warm hours out there. Further off to the west, somewhat similar situation where we are going to have snow along the Arctic coastline, but as we get further to the south and especially in the afternoon hours, expecting that to be primarily rain. That's going to be pushing down into the Kotzebue Sound area as well, but down through the west or southwest part of the state, not a lot of activity in terms of precipitation. That's going to be true for the Bering and Aleutians as well on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we are going to have a new system pushing up from the south, starting to bring in some rain to areas of the eastern Aleutian Islands and out over the Alaska Peninsula. Strong warm push with that, expecting it to all be rain at this point. Then in the southwestern part of the state, going to be clear of precipitation up above west coast as well, but we are going to see a mix of rain and snow along the Arctic coastline. Primarily snow in the morning, but that will be transitioning to primarily rain as we get into the afternoon and evening. As we drop down into the interior part of the state, some afternoon showers popping up in the central part of the interior. As we get to the far eastern locations, expecting some of those to be isolated rain showers. As we drop down into areas of the south central, higher elevations such as the Alaska Range and Talkeetna Mountains, expecting to see some afternoon showers developing there as well. Wrangell, St. Elias, going to see some showers there too. And then as we drop down to the Panhandle area, we are going to see some isolated areas of rain throughout much of the northern and eastern parts of the Panhandle. Let's look at our temperatures for Wednesday morning. Lows for tonight, that is going to be dropping down into the mid to upper 40s for much of the Panhandle area. As we move out towards the south central locations, we are going to see primarily the lower 40s, but as we get into the interior part of the Copper River Basin, getting a little bit cooler there. Golcana dropping down to 37 degrees overnight tonight. As we move into the interior part of the state, eastern parts of the interior into the mid to upper 30s, but central and western parts of the interior dropping down to the lower to mid 40s. A little bit warmer there, but as we move up into the Brooks Range, temperatures dropping just below freezing and all just below freezing all along the Arctic coastline. As we move out over the Kotzebue Sound area, seeing temperatures in the mid to upper 30s, with Kotzebue getting down to 38 degrees. In the Norton Sound area, dropping right around 40 degrees with Nome at 41, and Gamble dropping down to 39 degrees tonight. A little bit warmer as we get to the YK Delta area, temperatures dropping down into the lower to mid 40s there. Mid 40s for the Bristol Bay area, with King Salmon and Iliamna both dropping down to 44 degrees overnight for Wednesday morning. For the Alaska Peninsula, in the mid 40s there, and then lower 40s for the Aleutian Islands and Pribilofs, with St. Paul dropping down to 41 degrees. For Wednesday afternoon, temperatures getting up into the mid to upper 40s for the Aleutian Islands, mid 50s for the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay area into the mid 60s there, and mid 60s for much of the YK Delta as well. However, Macoriac staying a little bit cooler there, only getting up to around 51 degrees. Up along the west coast, mid 50s around the Norton Sound area, mid 40s around the Kotzebue Sound area, and then finally above freezing along the Arctic coastline, with areas in the Brooks Range getting up into the mid 40s. Then as we drop down into the interior, mid 60s for the most part. As we get a little bit further to the east, a little bit cooler there, only into the lower 60s. As we drop down to south central Alaska, seeing temperatures in the lower to mid 60s for the most part. And then down in the Panhandle, southern locations in the upper 50s, whereas we are going to get into the mid 60s as we get to the more northern locations. Thursday morning, low temps for the Panhandle area right around 50 degrees. Skagway staying a little bit warmer there, 55 degrees expected for the low. And then as we move out over areas of south central Alaska, in the mid 40s for the most part. Kenai a little bit warmer there at 49 degrees, and Golcana a little bit colder there at 41 degrees. Moving into the interior part of the state, we have temperatures primarily in the 40s, warmer as we get further to the west, and a little bit cooler off to areas in the east. Except for the Fort Yukon area, staying pretty warm there as well, 47 degrees. Along the Arctic coastline, dropping just below freezing for pretty much the entire North Slope area. And then above freezing in the mid-30s for the Kotzebue Sound area, right around 40 degrees for the Norton Sound area, lower to mid-40s for the YK Delta and for the Bristol Bay area, mid-40s for the Alaska Peninsula, extending out to the Aleutians and dropping down to the lower 40s as we get further to the west. St. Paul down to 42 degrees for Thursday morning. For Thursday afternoon, high temperatures in the mid-40s for the Aleutian Islands, in the lower 50s for much of the Alaska Peninsula, but getting up pretty quickly into the mid to upper 60s in the Bristol Bay area and the YK Delta area. Right above 50 for the Norton Sound area and in the 40s for much of the Kotzebue Sound area. Getting above freezing into the mid to upper 30s for the North Slope area and in the mid 60s for much of interior part of Alaska. Mid 60s for much of south central Alaska as well, except along the coast, lower 60s there, and in the upper 50s for much of the Panhandle. We'll be right back with the aviation.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
For the aviation section, we'll start off with our flying weather for Wednesday morning. Out over the central, western, and eastern Aleutians, we are seeing some IFR conditions out there. As we move over towards the Kodiak Island area, Alaska Peninsula, some MVFR and some occasional IFR conditions expected. Up along the Arctic coast, we're going to see a lot of IFR conditions up there and some MVFR conditions for the Kotzebue Sound area and northern parts of the Seward Peninsula. Some isolated areas of MVFR conditions for south central Alaska and MVFR down in the southeastern part of the Panhandle. For Wednesday afternoon, going to stay with those MVFR conditions in the southern part of the Panhandle area. Still some isolated areas of MVFR in south central Alaska, but the IFR conditions along the Arctic coastline should clear up to MVFR conditions by the afternoon, but still going to see a lot of IFR conditions throughout the Aleutian Islands towards the Alaska Peninsula on Wednesday afternoon. Then on Thursday morning, continuing to see IFR conditions for the Aleutian Islands out for much of the Alaska Peninsula and southern portions of Kodiak Island. IFR conditions developing again Thursday morning for the Arctic coastline and down for areas of eastern parts of the Seward Peninsula. South Central should be pretty clear as well as the interior, but as we get into the southeast part of the state, going to see some MVFR and IFR conditions there on Thursday morning. On Thursday afternoon, just going to see some MVFR conditions for the Panhandle area. Some of those MVFR conditions extending out over the eastern parts of south central Alaska. Along the Arctic coastline and Brooks Range, going to see some MVFR and occasional IFR conditions out there, and eastern or western parts of Kotzebue Sound and the Seward Peninsula extending down towards St. Lawrence Island. MVFR and IFR conditions remaining for the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula Thursday afternoon. For our flight weather for the passes, we're going to start off in AKwx. IFR conditions improving to marginal conditions later in the day, as well as Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill will both stay VFR throughout the day on Wednesday, as well as Rainy Pass, Windy Pass, and Isabel Pass, all remaining VFR throughout the day. Mentasta Pass, however, will be a little bit down into marginal conditions for the day, whereas Tenita Pass will start off in VFR, improve to VFR later in the day. Portage will be VFR throughout the day, and both Chilkoot and White will start off VFR and drop down to MVFR later in the afternoon and evening hours. For our freezing levels Wednesday morning, starting off along the Arctic coastline, our surface freezing line hugging the coast there, and we do have some of the colder temps dipping down towards the Brooks Range along the Arctic coastline with 6,000 feet for freezing levels going through much of the interior part of the state, dipping down through the Gulf of Alaska back out over the eastern part of the state, around 8,000 feet for the Panhandle area and out over much of the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. For our icing, most of it's going to be out over the mainland part of the state down into the Panhandle, up along the Arctic coastline up towards the Brooks Range below 5,000 feet there. But once we get south of the Brooks Range into the interior and further south in the state, a little bit higher for icing conditions between 5,000 and 10,000 over the Kotzebue Sound area, much of the interior between 6,000 and 10,000 feet. And that is going to be true as well along the Panhandle area between 6,000 and 10,000 feet expected for icing conditions there on Wednesday. For our jet, we do have multiple jet streaks moving around parts of the state just off to the northeast, 105 knot jet moving out of a southeasterly direction. Another jet streak at 75 knots coming down through the Bering Strait area, but the main part of the jet is going to be well south of our area with the exception of near the western Aleutian Islands, a 65 knot portion of the jet headed down into much of the northern Pacific. As we drop down to 9,000 feet, we do have flow around our high pressure between 15 and 20 knots for the most part, stronger as we get closer towards the Bering Strait area up to as high as 40 knots out of a northerly direction there. Easterly flow over the Aleutian Islands around 30 knots, diminishing as we get more into the Bering Sea. Light flow over much of the state except by the northern part of the state there, westerly flow 25 to 30 knots. For 3,000 feet, continuing to see the strongest flow over the state up by the Arctic coastline, 15 to 25 knots there, up to around 15 knots for much of mainland Alaska, but pretty light overall until we get out over parts of the Bering Sea, especially by the Aleutian Islands, up to 25 to 30 knots out of an easterly direction there. And again, a little bit higher as we get closer towards the Bering Strait in northeastern Russia. Northerly flow at about 25 knots there. Only area where we're really seeing turbulence is from areas of the central Aleutian Islands out by the AKwx area, extending east towards the Unalaska area. Expected to be around 4,000 feet and strongest with the easterly flow of the winds circulating around low pressure that's further to the south of our area. With that, we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider, and joining me again is Cindy Preller. She's the Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska Region's National Weather Service. Thanks again for joining us, Cindy.
Thanks for having me back, Dave.
Sure thing. And I love saying Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska's National Weather Service because that's not weather. Why is the Tsunami Program part of the National Weather Service?
Well, it's because the Weather Service absolutely rocks at warning people for every kind of, devastating natural hazard.
Mm-hmm. The mission of the Weather Service is to protect life and property. And so how does the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska, which is a very unique office, again, within the Weather Service, it's not weather, how do those folks help us protect life and property?
The National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer is a national warning center, and we analyze seismic traces 24/7 all around the world. So when there's an earthquake anywhere on the planet, we see it and analyze it within minutes.
Within minutes, and
Within
there's
minutes.
actually a goal to have it under, was it 5 minutes?
If there is a tsunami warning to be issued for continental America, we must get that out, or shoot to get that out in 5 minutes.
Okay. Now that's not something I have ever learned to do, so I know it would be a struggle for me to do that under probably hours, but it is fascinating to watch, and the office is open on a regular basis for tours, right?
Absolutely, come by Friday.
Okay.
Yep, every Friday at 1, 2, and 3 p.m. and they're open public free tours. And it's the most interesting place on the planet. You really should check it out.
Okay, and the office team is made up of people that are earth scientists, not meteorologists or atmospheric scientists. Talk about some of the types of people that work there.
Right, we are out of place in our National Weather Service, but we are geologists, geophysicists, oceanographers. We even have an astrophysicist on board, computer software architects, electronic technicians that are brilliant and innovative. Our software is all written in-house. Our instrumentation is designed in-house. So it's a really, really unique place, and it's just a couple handfuls of people that work there. So
sure.
Yeah.
One of my favorite ways to get a tsunami alert message is on Twitter.
Right.
And I can follow the Twitter address, and we'll put that up on the screen for you there. But it's usually a very quick message that tells you initially what the magnitude of an earthquake could be and about where its epicenter was. What are some of the other ways that you can get that alert message?
Well, Twitter's my favorite too.
Yeah.
And you don't even need a Twitter account to receive it. So
That's
it just comes in like an SMS message. But you can also receive it via email, weather radio, of course, the crawler on your television screen, on the internet, Google Alerts.
Right.
Marine radio if you're out in harbors and boats. Actually, marine radio is probably,
yeah, it is a good one.
That's our partnership with the Coast Guard. We're really grateful for that, absolutely. But there's a variety of ways in dissemination.
Okay.
And locally, excuse me, I'm sorry, but locally in the communities, the sirens will go off as well.
Right. So lots of different ways to get that very important message very quickly when that matters to you. One of the ways that the Warning Center practices with communities is a test on a yearly basis, right?
Right.
How does that work?
Thanks for bringing that up. It's a controversial issue, but it's super important to help us warn better and really serve Alaskans. So the week of March 27th, the commemoration of the 1964 event, for that week we have a Tsunami Preparedness Week every year. We like communities to get out and do drills and practice and do everything we can to raise awareness. And part of that is a live code test where we actually issue the warning message live and we activate the emergency alert system, which means sirens go off, the TV crawler happens, and it's a test, 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 test.
We're
and
doing everything that would normally happen without the real threat of the tsunami, just to practice as much as possible.
Right, and this is a major partnership with the State of Alaska, Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, the Emergency Operations Center, and the Alaska Broadcasters Association. Without the media, we wouldn't be able to do this. So the three groups really work tightly together to do our best to warn, educate the public that this is happening, so they don't wonder and get scared about it. It has been remarkable what we've learned. I mean, it pretty much breaks somewhere every time, but then we fix it, and it gets better. So a quick example is just a few years ago, we used to, when we issued a message, it would activate the entire state. Right? I mean, Kotzebue, Nome, Bethel, everybody would be in tsunami warning. And so now we can regionalize it to where the actual event is taking place. That's pretty huge.
Right. So identifying points of failure and also points of success, and making sure we continue down that successful path so that folks are warned as quickly and accurately as possible.
Absolutely. And you know, to get our communities involved, to prep themselves, prep their businesses, prep their tourism, prep their schools, you know, just make this an annual thing they need to be doing.
Right. So as citizens wanting to be prepared, we should be prepared to learn more about that test that's happening usually toward the end of March every year.
Right, and you should be happy that it's happening.
Right.
Instead of upset. Definitely be happy that it's happening.
Right. Just as we test tornado sirens in tornado country, we also have to test the tsunami program as well.
Right, because there isn't enough time. You know, for a local tsunami, the wave will arrive in less than 2 minutes. So it's super important that people know what to do.
Very good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for helping us know more about the Tsunami Ready program and the test. And the Tsunami Warning Center is a very unique and very important job in the National Weather Service that is just fascinating to me every time I visit the office. So,
it's the only one for the continent. You really should come check it out.
It's an international effort.
Yes.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Dave.
And thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Starting off with the marine forecast, we'll start off with the sea ice edge. We do have a lot of clearing out over areas north of the Bering Strait and along the west coast. But we do, however, with the northerly winds up there, pushing some of the remaining ice further to the south and back towards the coast somewhat. However, a lot of the water is still warm enough where that ice should be melting as it does push to the south. There is no new growing ice in these areas, just some remaining ice that is being moved to the south with the winds. As we look out for the main part of the marine forecast for southeast part of the state, we do have weak winds, 10 to 15 knots in the inside waters, primarily out of a southerly direction. Out over the Gulf, around 15 knots there, more westerly up to the north and becoming more northerly as we get out into the eastern portions of the Gulf. Then on Thursday, still pretty quiet in much of the inside waters, 10 to 15 knots out of the south, but as we get further to the north up by Juneau and Skagway, we are going to see winds out around 25 knots out of a southerly direction. Westerly winds out over much of the Gulf, 10 to 15 knots there, with seas up to as high as 6 feet. Out for the south central locations, we do have primarily westerly flow out over the Gulf here, 15 to 20 knots, much along all of the northern and western parts of the Gulf. In the Prince William Sound area, northwest flow 15 knots there. And as we look in Cook Inlet, weak flow, southerly 10 knots there and 15 knots out of the west by the Barren Islands. And as we move into Thursday, we have southerly flow 15 to 20 knots moving into the Cook Inlet area. And then out over much of the Gulf, weaker winds, 10 to 15 knots there, primarily southwesterly flow. And then as we get into Prince William Sound area, southeast 10 knots expected. For Wednesday, for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island areas, primarily southwest flow, weaker as we get further to the south in the Pacific, 10 knots there, getting up to as high as 20 knots as we get closer towards Kodiak Island, and then northerly flow by Cold Bay out around 10 knots there. Seas highest around Kodiak Island, 5 to 6 feet, strongest on the Gulf side. Then on Thursday, we have primarily southerly flow around Kodiak Island, 15 to 20 knots there, seas around 5 feet, but as we get into areas further into the North Pacific, down around the Alaska Peninsula, we have easterly flow, 30 to 35 knots with seas as high as 12 feet. On the Bering side, around 25 knots, and then as we get into the Bristol Bay area, south wind at 10 knots. As we look over the Aleutian Islands, northeasterly flow primarily 15 to 20 knots for the western and central Aleutians. And as we move out over the eastern Aleutian Islands, primarily easterly flow, but pretty light and variable to some degree, around 10 to 15 knots. Then as we move into Thursday, northeasterly flow 30 knots on the Bering side, getting as high as 40 knots on the Pacific side, seas 14 to 16 feet. And as we move out to the central and western Aleutian Islands, winds dropping down anywhere from 30 to 35 down to 15 knots as we get closer towards Shimia. For the west coast of the state, we do have weaker flow, primarily out of a somewhat northerly direction, 10 to 15 knots for the most part, seas only getting up to as high as around 3 feet. Then on Thursday, still seeing that northerly flow, but a little bit stronger now, 15 to 20 knots for the most part, seas up to around 4 feet now at their highest. Then as we look up along the Arctic coastline for the western areas of the Arctic coastline, around 10 to 15 knots there, primarily a northerly direction until we get down by the Seward Peninsula, where we are seeing more of a westerly direction. And then light and relatively variable flow along the remainder of the Arctic coastline, 5 to 10 knots there. As we move into Thursday, still pretty light and variable, but starting to get somewhat of a northwesterly direction, 5 to 10 knots. And then as we move out towards the western part of the coastline, 15 to 20 knots out of a northwest to north direction. As we move into weather for the remainder of the night, much of the Bering Sea, Aleutian Islands, and west coast not going to see any new precipitation, but there are some areas of fog, areas around Bristol Bay, the Pribilof Islands, St. Lawrence Island, and up by the Point Hope and Point Lay areas. Out through the interior part of the state, going to see a lot of smoke in those areas from the many small fires out in the interior. Up along the Arctic coastline, low and front moving through, bringing some snow to areas of the Arctic coastline and the Brooks Range. Then down in the south central, primarily the eastern part of the Copper River Basin area, going to see a mix of rain and snow showers. Snow in the higher elevations, more rain as we get in the more low-lying areas. Then down in the Panhandle area, some areas of rain, with the strongest areas being further to the south. For Wednesday, we are going to see continued rain in and around much of the Panhandle area. Moving into the south central area, going to see some rain showers there as well, primarily in the higher elevations such as the Alaska Range and the Talkeetna Mountains. As we move into the interior, no new precipitation expected, but we are going to continue to see the areas of smoke in the interior. As we move up to the Arctic coastline, going to start off with some snow for the Arctic coast and for the Brooks Range. However, that is going to transition over to rain as we move into the afternoon and evening hours. Down in the Kotzebue Sound area, going to see some rain showers there as well. And then out through much of the Bering Sea, Aleutian Islands, Alaska Peninsula, southwest part of the state. Shouldn't see any new precipitation there, with high pressure dominating the area. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.